welcome to another Silhouette Studio tutorial. I'm Jane and today I'm looking at using image effects in Silhouette Studio. You might not have heard of image effects, much less used them, but after today you might find them to be incredibly useful. You can open the image effects panel from the right hand toolbar here. It's the circle that's half light, half dark. It's quite a small panel with some icons across the top. In Basic Edition, the only one that you won't have access to is this last one called Shadow, but all the other options will be there. If you're ever in doubt about what features you have when you're watching a Silhouette Studio tutorial, you can always check out this page at Silhouette America. I'll leave a link below. It's a comparison of all the editions from Basic right up to Business Edition with the features down the left hand side and a check mark all along telling you which ones have which features. The image effects that I'm talking about today are here, and you can see we've got check marks across all editions. The only thing that is missing, as I've said, will be the shadow. You've got black and white, tint and colour saturation. This icon here means there's a short video explaining what the image effects do, and if you click it, it will open a new window, take you off to YouTube, where they cycle through the effects on these three images. I'm not going to go into that much detail today. I am concentrating on two effects only. This bright sun spot one here, which is contrast, brightness and saturation, and the letters FX for gamma. Why am I discussing image effects? Well, it's in response to a little discussion I had last month with a lovely viewer called Rose. She sent me a photograph of this card she made from the tutorial last month and mentioned she was a little disappointed with how her patterned papers had printed, that they perhaps weren't as vibrant as they appeared on the screen. This can be a problem, and there is no easy one-size-fits-all solution. Everybody's monitor is different, and not only that, your monitor changes over time as it gets older. It doesn't produce the same colour vibrancy. Then we've got to add in everybody's printer is different. We all use different models. Not only that, we all use different brands of cardstock or paper. So you can see that it's going to be very difficult to say, do this and your results will always be wonderful. It's always going to be a matter of trial and error and finding out how your screen compares to your printer and what it produces. The only reason that I have relatively decent results is because I've had some relatively awful mistakes. To explain a little further the effect that I'm talking about, I've done a screenshot here. Now it's very difficult to illustrate this problem because of course we're looking at it on my monitor. And even were I to try and print something out, I will still have a photograph of it that will be on my monitor. So it's very difficult to show you the differences between monitor and printing. However, I can show you a little illustration of what I get when I work in Photoshop and then take the image into Silhouette Studio. On the left is my handily labelled Photoshop image, and on the right my Silhouette Studio screenshot. And if we look at the top flower here, we can see that the blue is a lot more vibrant. Over on the right in Silhouette Studio, it seems to be a little duller, a bit flatter, perhaps with a bit more grey in. It's often called less saturated. Either way, it doesn't appear as vibrant, and this is perhaps what you're experiencing when you see something in Silhouette Studio. It's looking brighter on your screen than it is by the time you're printing it out. Is there anything you can do to help that along, to perhaps improve your results? And of course the answer is yes, and that's why we're having a little go at this tutorial. Here is the same card that I've just shown you in that screenshot comparison. We're in Silhouette Studio. I've done nothing to it, and you can see it's a little bit dull here. How can I use the two image effects that I'm going to concentrate on to improve the result I might get with printing? Well, first of all, let's make a copy. Undo. What we really need to do first is ungroup. And I'm really sorry, but it appears my neighbours next door are suddenly having some work done. The joys of neighbours. I'm going to carry on. If it really gets too noisy, I will stop. Just move our copies down here away from the actual card base, and I'm keeping one to the left so we can see any changes that we managed to make. I'm also going to take off the grid so that we've got a nice clear background that isn't distracting us. So the first thing we can try is select our image that we want to make a change to, and the first simple one that you can try is the gamma, and that's under FX, and this is really about shades of grey. Before I go any further, I must explain some strange behaviour that I discovered in Silhouette Studio, which is why it's taken me a little while to get around to answering Rosa's question. If your image that you wish to edit using image effects is grouped, the slider here will not behave properly. It will move, but it will keep snapping back to 50 or whatever it's set at in the middle, whatever these are. And you won't know if you've actually applied any effects. Now, I didn't realise that's why it was happening, but if I ungroup my shoe from its cut line and select just my shoe by clicking on it, and now move my slider, you'll see that it stays and it says it's at 55. My best advice, therefore, is when you come to want to alter your images, is to make sure they are ungrouped from any cut lines and regroup them afterwards. So, having explained that, and hopefully that will save you the 3 weeks it took me to work out what was going on, let's have a look at what gamma does. It basically makes things lighter if you take it to the right, and if you go to the left, it makes things darker, until most often, if you go right to 0, you will end up with a black image. Remember that, because that's going to become useful later on. You will decide which one of these to use, gamma, or the next one we're going to do, brightness, contrast and saturation, depending on your image. You'll just test it and see which one looks better. It might even be that you use a combination of both. You might decide to take the gamma up to 51 or take it down even to make it a little bit darker. But you will have to just practice and see which suits what image, and eventually you'll get an eye for what works and what doesn't. In brightness and contrast and saturation, you've got 3 sliders, and you can see instantly that means we're going to have more control over the adjustments that we can make. Brightness, of course, is light and dark, as usual. If you go to the right, you get a nice lurid colour that will give you a headache. And if we go to the left and all the way down, we get a black image again. Remember that, it's useful to know. Let's put it back in the 0 so we can check out what the others do. Contrast, to be honest, also seems to make things just brighter. But if you notice, it doesn't go to light, it just contrasts the colours, it brings them out. And again, if you go to the left, you get shades of grey until you get all the way down to solid grey. Saturation is the amount of colour, and if I go to the right, I'm increasing saturation, so the blues will get more vibrant. And if you use saturation in conjunction with contrast, then that is how you will increase the brightness and vividness of your colour. Similarly, if you take saturation to the left, you start taking colour out until by the time you've got to -100, you have a grayscale image. And that might be quite useful if you wish to change an image from colour to black and white or shades of grey. For the purposes of my shoe, I think these 3 are the ones that I will use. And which one do you start with? Well, again, it's a little bit of trial and error. I think I want a little bit more colour, so I'm going to go with upping the saturation. Now, these sliders aren't particularly responsive, so you can use the little arrows at the side instead to go up by increments of 1 or down. You can also type exact figures into the box. So if I decide 11.5 is what I want, I can type in the 5 and press enter, and it will stay at 11.5. If I then use the arrow, it will go up by 1s again, and it won't go back to 11.5. I'd have to type it in, and that will be the same with all of these boxes. So let's try 11, because I probably won't be typing figures in all the time. And let's try a bit of contrast as well. And then let's try a tiny bit of brightness, which I don't think we need very much at all. You see, now that's very bright compared to what it was here. And that blue there is looking more like the blue that I remember from seeing this in Photoshop. In fact, I'll go and have a quick look. Yeah, it's not bad, but I have got a lot whiter or brighter on this blue of the flower. And that's where you start having to make decisions about how bright you go. So I'm going to take that down a little bit, and I think I'll call that good. So I decided here that these settings will work for that. It looks all right on my screen, and it's not too different from the blue that's sitting here. One other thing I should mention, if you've made a rectangle or drawn a shape with any fill colour, these image effects do not work. They only work on images like this, where you've brought them in, not on shapes that you've actually drawn. If you want to make a colour lighter or darker, you would use the fill tools as usual and the colour palette there. So now that I'm happy with that, I can group my shoe together. Now you might have noticed that since we've made these adjustments, I appear to have a secondary grey line just offset from my design, and if we zoom in, I'm not entirely certain why it does that. I have printed this card recently and this grey line didn't print as far as I could see. If you're in any doubt, make sure it's not impinging upon any part of the design where you wouldn't want it and test what happens for your printing. If it's a print and cut piece like my shoe is, my red cut line is actually within the blue of the original shoe, and so this grey line will be cut away anyway and won't be a problem. Image effects are not confined to small graphic images like shoes that I have here. You can also use it on digital papers, and this is where I finally answer the question Rose had. Here's a paper from Shabby Princess. Knowing that what I see on my screen and how my printer is, I might decide I'm going to brighten this a little before I print it. Of course, you may have done a test print first to see what it looks like, because of course it's going to print differently depending upon the media that you use, card or paper, and what the quality of those are. I'm going to make a copy of this so that we can have them side by side like this, and then we can see the differences. So the first thing, with a paper, I would probably try Gamma first, because you either want to lighten or darken the whole thing. So I would have a look and see what Gamma does and whether it gives me the effect that I want, or is this getting too faded. So that's at 52. 53 is getting quite light, isn't it? I'd probably try that and maybe put a little square of it on a test piece along with an original. So we could then make another copy and try brightness and contrast instead and see what result we get with that. So do I want to increase saturation? Let's go for contrast first. So that makes the colours a little bit more vibrant, and I actually quite like that. So let's call that 13. And I might find that that's actually enough. No, maybe not. I think let's do a bit of brightness. Oh, that's far too much. See, we haven't gone very far there, and that's taking it a little too bright. I think probably 2 or maybe 3 would work there. And I'll try saturation, but I think that's going to make it too lurid. Well, maybe a little bit. There we go. 11. So here I've got 3 versions. I've got my original, which is quite distressed and dark and looks great on the screen. I've got this second one here, which is the Gamma version, where I've just lightened the overall thing, and you can see that that actually flattens all the colour. And then we've got this third version that we've altered using contrast, brightness and saturation, and you can see again it gives us a little more control, and we get a little more depth and change of colour throughout the paper. So there you go, Rose. You can use image effects to brighten and change your digital papers. I'm sorry I can't be more specific and say use particular settings. It's really going to be a case of using your eye to see what your screen looks like compared to what your printer produces. And eventually you'll get an eye for it. It's really just practice. And that's the only reason that I'm any good, is because I've practiced and thrown away an awful lot of paper in the process. Now I want to quickly return to something I mentioned earlier. I said, remember that the gamma setting and the brightness setting, you can turn an image completely to black. And I said that that would be useful. Why? Well, here's an image that's got a lot of light colours, And let's say I want to trace this to make a sticker. You already know I'm going to have trouble because it's going to pick up the dark areas and not the light. So let's show you. We'll do select trace area and draw around roughly our bicycle. And here you can see what I mean already. The darker colours are being picked up and the lighter colours aren't. Yes, I can indeed increase the threshold, and if I take it right up, it does eventually pull in all the design. But sometimes that doesn't work, does it? So let's make a copy and let's take it down here just out of the way briefly. And now let's apply some image effects. Now I've tested this and both of the methods work. I can use gamma down to 0 and it turns it black, or I can use brightness and it turns it black. I could also take the contrast way up too to make sure it's really black. So either of those, or even doing both of them in conjunction with each other, would work. Except, and I don't know why this happens, when I click apply, this happens, I get red areas. However, I can pop back into brightness and whip it down to 100 and click apply and the red areas disappear. I'm sure there's a reason for them, but I don't know what that is. And now of course I can do my select trace area and immediately I've got a much better trace and I've got more room in my threshold if I want to increase it to get these finer lines of the bicycle, and I'm not near the limit of my settings because I've made the image black and it is being more easily traced. If you have graphics where you've got multiple colours and they're not registering properly for you to get a good outline trace so that you can cut around them, try using image effects, either gamma or contrast, brightness and saturation, or even a mixture of both, to turn your image to a nice black so that your trace tool will work perfectly. That's all for this video. I do hope that the building noises from next door weren't too distracting. I'll probably find out when I edit this, won't I? That's all for today's Silhouette Studio tutorial. Thank you for your company. I'll be back with another video very soon and talk to you all then.